That manic year, Caleb shattered Liam's pride. He forced him to become his secret, a lover kept in the shadows, dominating him, trying to mark him as his own. He learned too late that Liam was the only son of the nation's highest-ranking general, while Caleb was merely the self-proclaimed prince of a tech fortune. To avoid the inevitable fallout, he faked his own death. He never knew that Liam clutched an urn of his supposed ashes and wept for 3 years. He didn't know Liam discovered the ashes were just green Gatorade powder, or that he'd furiously turned the entire country upside down searching for him. When Liam finally found him, Caleb was stuffing cash into the waistband of a dancer at a male revue. Liam's grip on the back of his neck was so tight Caleb thought his glands might just burst. Liam's voice was a low growl, questioning if the dancer was more thrilling than he was. In the pulsing chaos of the club, Liam held him flush against his body. The music was a physical force, and Liam had to lean in close, his breath hot against Caleb's ear, for Caleb to even begin to understand him. He surmised that Liam had always known he was a creature of pure impulse. Liam pointed out that if Caleb could kidnap him 3 years ago, he could certainly use the same tactics on others now. He demanded to know what he was to Caleb. Just some piece of trash to be discarded when he grew bored? Liam was incandescent with rage, his face a cold mask. But in his eyes, beneath the fury and frustration, burned a fire that was something else entirely, something deeply familiar and unspoken. Caleb had never considered himself a masochist, but in that moment he wasn't so sure. The sight of that face, even twisted in anger, was intoxicating. Hearing Liam curse him out felt strangely, wonderfully right. 3 years had done nothing to diminish Liam's stunning looks. He joined the military, and the uniform was the ultimate accessory. The sharp lines of the dark green service dress did little to hide the powerful shoulders, narrow waist, and long, imposing legs. Only Caleb knew the landscape that lay beneath that perfectly pressed fabric. When Liam had suddenly appeared before him, that handsome face was an unexpected, visceral shock. The professionally beautiful dancers flanking them faded into the background, utterly eclipsed. He was still, after all this time, the finest man Caleb had ever managed to spend a year sleeping with. Back in college, Liam had been at the top of everyone's list. Caleb had been smitten at first sight and resorted to a few unsavory methods just for a single night with him. The taste had been addictive, and he'd used every trick in the book to keep Liam tethered to him for a year. That is, until he discovered who Liam really was, a man whose power he couldn't possibly contend with. So he ran, staging his own demise. A sharp pressure on his neck brought Caleb back to the present. Liam's fingers tightened, and an involuntary whimper escaped Caleb's lips as he sagged against him. The bastard knew exactly how to touch him. The raw sound seemed to catch Liam off guard. A dark blush crept up his neck, and his expression flickered with uncertainty. He hissed, asking how Caleb could be so shameless, getting so hot in a crowded place like this. Caleb shot him a glare, thinking it was entirely Liam's fault his body was reacting this way. He leaned in and bit Liam's earlobe lightly. He whispered that there were even hotter places, daring Liam to guess where. Liam's blush deepened. He simply ordered him to shut up. Seeing him flustered ignited a spark of mischief in Caleb. He met Liam's gaze directly and told him that, compared to the dancer, Liam was obviously more satisfying. He asked if Liam had forgotten how Caleb used to praise him every single day for that year they were together, reminding him that he had once called Liam his favorite, most perfect pet. He wasn't sure which part of that statement was the trigger, but Liam's reaction was explosive, like a cornered leopard. He hauled Caleb out of the club and back to his apartment, where he proceeded to ignore him completely. Caleb's attempts to offer himself up were met with a cold, dismissive push. Liam actually told him to have some self-respect. After everything they had done, he wanted self-respect. It was infuriating. And yet, for all his coldness, Liam would hold him through the night as they slept. But come morning, he would look at Caleb as if he were invisible, offering no word or glance. It was as if he'd gone to all the trouble of hunting him down just to have a living, breathing background decoration. If this continued, Caleb knew he would have to plan another escape. But before he did, he wanted one more taste. He'd spent $40 million on a life he'd had to abandon just to play with Liam for a year. He felt he was owed some compensation. Through persistent effort, he managed to charm the family's physician into becoming an ally. The doctor supplied him with a bottle of potent sleeping pills. That evening, Caleb carried a glass of milk, laced with the sedative, into Liam's study. He told him to drink it and get some sleep. Liam merely looked up, raising an eyebrow in a clear, unspoken demand. "Feed me." Caleb hesitated. It wasn't an impossible request. Considering his plans for later, a little appeasement now might be worth it. He lifted the glass to Liam's lips and told him to drink. Liam, however, pushed his advantage, insisting Caleb use his mouth, the way Caleb used to make him do. He said he wouldn't drink it otherwise. Caleb nearly threw the glass against the wall. The man's thirst for revenge was astounding. 3 years had passed, and he was still looking for payback for the humiliating games Caleb had made him play. It seemed every seed of cruelty Caleb had sown was now bearing bitter fruit. With his mind fixated on the night's objective, he reluctantly complied, feeding Liam half the glass of milk, a good portion of which ended up in his own stomach. Fearing he'd succumb to the drug first, he quickly pulled away and rushed to drink 2 large glasses of water, but the sedative was too powerful. His limbs grew heavy, and he collapsed onto the sofa, falling into a deep, unshakable sleep. At midnight, he crept into Liam's room in the pitch black. Liam was lying on the bed, utterly still. He was so deeply asleep that he didn't stir as Caleb undressed beside him. After fumbling for what felt like an eternity, Caleb finally climbed into the bed, only to discover that Liam was completely naked. He couldn't recall Liam ever having such a habit. He felt a little cheated, remembering how fiercely Liam had guarded himself back then, getting angry at the slightest touch. To get past his defenses, Caleb had bought black market aphrodisiacs, knowing even the most disciplined man couldn't resist their chemical influence. He owed his entire conquest to modern science. He had been young and reckless then, his methods truly shameful, and he'd earned Liam's hatred for it. He'd once found Liam's journal, its pages filled with furious denunciations of him. That's why, upon discovering Liam's true identity, he had been terrified of what Liam and his family would do in retaliation. He'd run away, believing his death would bring Liam joy. He never imagined that the news of his demise would lead to this. Liam had despised being taken by force, so why had he dragged him back now? The thought that this was all an elaborate revenge scheme made his heart pound with fear. They were on completely different levels now. If Liam wanted to crush him, it would be as easy as squashing an ant. And his father's company had been struggling for years. Bankruptcy was a looming threat. The idea of a future where he couldn't even afford cheap takeout, let alone male dancers, filled him with a surge of defiant anger. He leaned down and bit into the firm curve of Liam's pectoral muscle. The texture was exquisite, soft yet resilient. Liam's own scent, a cool, clean mint, began to fill the room, stirring in response. Caleb nuzzled against his chest, wishing he could actually eat him. Doing all the work was exhausting. He made a mental note to ask his black market contact if he was still in business. Maybe he had something better than sleeping pills. After a long, busy night, he had intended to leave after having his fill, but he was too depleted. He passed out right on top of Liam. With a sliver of foresight, he had set an alarm, planning to make a quick getaway. But when the alarm blared, it was Liam who woke up. Liam's eyes, red with fury, stared up at Caleb, who was still draped over him. He snarled that Caleb must have a death wish. Before Caleb could process what was happening, Liam had flipped him over and was pinning him to the mattress, intent on delivering a harsh lesson. Caleb tried to push him away, pleading that he had nothing left to give after his solo efforts all night. Another round, he gasped, would surely finish him. Liam, in a fit of pique, seized the soft flesh of his neck with his teeth and muffledly demanded to know why he shouldn't take what he was owed. He argued that Caleb always got to have his secret fun while he was the one left feeling used. Caleb clutched at his neck, frantically trying to push him away. He suggested that next time, Liam could just give him the sleeping pills. He told him not to be so stingy. Enraged, Liam flipped him onto his stomach and delivered a sharp smack to his backside, ordering him to shut up. The man was infuriatingly strong, an absolute bastard who refused to be on the losing end of any exchange. As Liam took his time with him, Caleb's mind went blank, all thoughts of anger and escape dissolving into the intense present. He avoided Liam for 3 days, his life falling into a dull routine of eating and sleeping. He scrolled aimlessly through his phone, a voyeur into other people's more exciting lives. He had been planning to hide out indefinitely, but on the 4th day, his body betrayed him. His cycle hit unexpectedly, a troublesome irregularity he now wished he'd seen a doctor about. It left him feeling desperate and needy, so he resorted to his old trick. He crushed a sleeping pill into a glass of water and brought it to Liam in his study. Liam glanced at him, took the glass, and drained it. Then, with a slight, knowing curve to his lips, he gestured for Caleb to hold out his hand. Caleb obeyed, and Liam calmly spat the undissolved pill into his palm. He advised him to remember to let it dissolve next time. Heat flooded Caleb's face. He could have spontaneously combusted from the sheer, idiotic humiliation. After a frantic, split-second mental scramble for a strategy, he threw himself into Liam's lap, opting for a performance of pitiful, heartfelt desperation. He claimed he only did it because he missed him so much, blaming Liam's intimidating demeanor for making a normal approach impossible. He insisted that everything he did was for the sake of being with him. As he was delivering his impassioned speech, his foot accidentally kicked a small container under the desk. He looked down and recognized the tea canister he'd had sent to Liam, the one that held his ashes. Liam's fingers toyed with the sensitive glands on his neck. He murmured that if Caleb loved him that much, they should go get married the next day. Caleb froze. Liam's voice was a low, mesmerizing hum as he repeated the suggestion. He asked Caleb to marry him. Forcing a smile, Caleb made one last attempt at resistance. He asked what would happen if he said no. The pressure on his neck increased slightly. Liam stated that he would go whether he wanted to or not. Caleb then asked if he could at least know the reason why. Liam's reply was that it was the natural order of things for someone like him to marry someone like Liam. Liam capped his pen and leaned back, his gaze sharp and tinged with amusement. He accused Caleb of trying to use him and get away with it, labeling his actions as abandonment and informing him he could be sued in federal court. Caleb was dumbfounded. He wondered when abandonment had become a crime. There were plenty of people who played the field far more than he did. At least he had only ever been with Liam. He wasn't afraid of any court. Liam squeezed his cheek gently, his voice firm. He said it was a crime if he said it was. Only then did Caleb notice a tiny, dark mole near the corner of Liam's eye that hadn't been there before. An old wives' tale from his hometown claimed such marks were formed from the tears of a grieving lover. The thought sent a strange flutter through his chest. He reached up, his finger gently tracing the mole, though his words remained defiant. He argued that there was no such thing as a natural order, that plenty of people chose not to marry. Suddenly, Liam picked up the glass of drugged water and poured it down the front of Caleb's shirt. The warm liquid trickled over his skin, and for a moment, his mind went completely blank. He wondered when Liam had learned to be so effortlessly dominant. Liam's voice was cold, tight with restraint. He said that after Caleb had used him up and left him for dead, he had spent a long time looking for him. Of course, this was revenge. He asked Caleb to consider, after all the times Caleb had forced him, whether it wasn't fair for him to collect a little interest. Without waiting for an answer, he buried his face in Caleb's neck. He scooped him up with one arm, remarking that his clothes were wet and he would help him change. But his feet carried them not toward the bedroom, but straight to the bathroom. It was going to be another long, sleepless night. By the time he was allowed out of bed, it was Saturday morning. The immediate threat of being marched to the courthouse had passed, and he breathed a sigh of relief. He learned that the doctor who had supplied him with pills 3 years ago was no longer practicing. A mutual acquaintance, a broker he was friendly with, informed him that the man had been a fraud, selling counterfeit medicine. He'd been in prison for the past year, serving a 7-year sentence. Fake medicine? That seemed impossible. He remembered how Liam would become a completely different person every time he was dosed. Could it be that he had been pretending all along? The thought was staggering. Could he actually, like him? The realization sent his entire belief system crashing down. Had their whole cat and mouse game just been an elaborate ruse to make Caleb think that stolen goods tasted sweeter? His mind reeled. To test his new theory, he had a friend send over a package containing a bottle of mysterious white pills, which were, in fact, just vitamin supplements. At dinner that evening, the table was laden with oysters, kidney stew, and turtle soup, all notorious aphrodisiacs. It was almost laughable. He resolved to wear his most secure underwear later. Liam could try his best, but he wouldn't get through it. He was bored out of his mind. Used to a life of clubs, parties, and fast cars, Caleb was a quintessential trust fund kid, always chasing the next thrill. These last few days under Liam's watchful eye had been stifling. When a message popped up in a group chat about a party that night, he felt a pang of longing. Liam, noticing the look on his face, made a surprising offer. He said Caleb could go. Thrilled, Caleb leaned over and gave him a quick kiss, asking why he was being so nice. Liam's tone shifted, revealing the catch. There were 2 conditions. First, Liam was coming with him. Second, they would be intimate once per hour they were out, with any fraction of an hour rounding up. Caleb's excitement deflated. If Liam came, all his fun would be ruined. And the second condition was just insane. Still, after a long debate with himself, he agreed, a cunning plan forming in his mind. If the count was hourly, he could just stay for 30 minutes, call it a night, and leave Liam hanging. The thought made him feel quite clever as they headed out. In the car, he idly scrolled through his social media feed. Liam leaned over occasionally, offering commentary. He asked if Caleb had spent the last 3 years just partying like this. Caleb shook his head, saying that wasn't possible. Liam then asked what he had been doing, if he was still breaking hearts everywhere. That wasn't quite true either. When they'd first met in college, Caleb already had a reputation. Liam had hidden his background, presenting himself as a brilliant, straight-A student. Caleb, on the other hand, was the lazy heir whose father had donated 2 buildings to get him admitted. He ran with a crowd just like him, living a life of careless indulgence. He'd noticed Liam by chance during his sophomore year. The university had implemented a mandatory swimming test for finals, and Caleb was terrified of water. He'd spent days just staring at the pool in the athletic center, paralyzed by fear. His father had made it clear that getting him into the school was one thing, but if he dared to fail a class, his legs would be broken. So he had no choice. But he just couldn't bring himself to get in the water. Then he saw Liam, swimming with an effortless grace and an incredible physique, and decided Liam had to teach him. He was shocked when Liam flatly refused without a second glance. Annoyed by the rejection, Caleb began to pester him relentlessly. He followed him everywhere, showing up in his dorm room at night and climbing into his bed. Soon, the entire campus knew about Caleb's aggressive pursuit. Eventually, his patience wore out, and he resorted to drugging Liam and carrying him off. So no, Liam's initial impression of him wasn't exactly favorable. It had been, admittedly, a hostile takeover. Later, when he'd wanted to bring Liam home to meet his parents, his father had taken one look at him and frozen. He pulled Caleb aside, hissing that this was the broke background lest nobody he'd been talking about. He revealed that Liam was the son of the top general in the country, a man he'd had dinner with. He demanded to know why Caleb hadn't done a background check before getting involved. If he had offended this man, their entire family fortune, built over a lifetime of hard work, could vanish overnight. Caleb was more afraid of his other father, and even more terrified of being broke. So the coward ran. He recounted a carefully edited version of the past 3 years to Liam. After faking his death, he'd started traveling, staying in each new place for a while whether he liked it or not. He hated being alone, so he made friends easily, a rotating cast of drinking buddies with whom he'd share his fabricated life stories. Sometimes, when the mood struck, he would polish these stories and post them online under a pseudonym. His account had gained over 1 million followers. Liam gently stroked his hair and asked if he was the main character. Caleb shook his head, admitting that sometimes he was. A flicker of disappointment crossed Liam's face. He quietly reminded Caleb that he had once promised to write a novel with him as the protagonist. It took Caleb a moment, but just as they were getting out of the car, he remembered. It was after one of their more intense nights together. He'd called Liam a beast and declared he would write a book where he was the master and Liam was his loyal pet. A masochistic dog who would adore him no matter how cruelly he was treated. Looking at him now, it seemed he had a talent for prophecy. Liam was stuck to him like glue, even insisting on tagging along to a reunion with old friends. It had been a while since he'd been back in the city, and the party was full of unfamiliar faces. Even the people he knew he hadn't seen in 3 years. When they saw him walk in with Liam, the room fell silent. Miles, his former best friend, nudged him in the ribs, expressing his shock that they were still together and remarking on Caleb's previously undiscovered capacity for devotion. Caleb pleaded with him to keep his voice down, not wanting Liam to overhear. It was true he'd been a bit of a player back in the day, but his flings were mostly harmless, often ending before they even held hands. He just loved the thrill of the chase. He only realized he had genuine feelings for Liam after he'd left, but by then it was too late to turn back. He had been waiting for time to dull the memory, never expecting the man from his memories to show up and try to create new ones. When he tuned back in, Miles and the others were already deep into their drinks. Liam had taken the seat of honor at the head of the table, an empty space on either side of him. As Caleb debated where to sit, Liam reached out and pulled him into his lap. He asked if Caleb wanted to sing. A playful idea sparked in Caleb's mind. He had never heard Liam sing before and requested a song. Liam's eyes were downcast as he carefully fastened the top button of Caleb's shirt, his knuckles brushing against Caleb's cheek. He agreed, but only if they sang together. Caleb found himself curious about what kind of song Liam would choose. Liam continued to fidget with his collar and earlobes, treating him like a favorite toy. After a moment, he asked if Caleb had any suggestions. Without thinking, Caleb blurted out that it absolutely could not be islands in the stream. When asked why, he explained the old superstition that couples who sang that song were doomed to break up. It was probably nonsense, but he was strangely superstitious about things like that. Liam's eyes lit up. He asked if that meant Caleb didn't want to break up with him. Caleb shook his head, denying that was what he meant. Liam pressed on, clarifying that they were, in fact, a couple. Caleb muttered under his breath, calling him childish. A moment later, Liam wore the triumphant smirk of a successful prankster. Caleb saw that he had selected a song, a ridiculously over-the-top boy band power ballad from the 90s. Liam informed him that he would be singing the high harmony. Caleb never, in his wildest dreams, would have imagined that the stoic, formidable Liam would stand in a private karaoke room, microphone in hand, and earnestly croon his way through a cheesy love song just to hear Caleb sing along. In that moment, he felt his heart begin to beat a little faster for him all over again. Miles leaned in and whispered, asking if he was falling for him again. Caleb nodded, admitting that he was pretty amazing. Miles joked that if he was really grateful, he should just let Liam have his way with him later. Caleb jabbed him with his elbow. The two of them had been inseparable back when Caleb was pursuing Liam, with Miles providing a steady stream of terrible advice. He was the one who had introduced Caleb to the broker and the black market dealer. Thinking of this, Caleb asked him about the fake drugs. He wondered if they had caused any long-term damage to Liam after nearly a year of use. Miles looked confused for a moment, then muttered that if they were fake, he was still using them. They stared at each other for a long, awkward moment. To change the subject, Caleb asked Miles to confess who he was using his own strong-arm tactics on. Miles refused, saying it was unbroadcastable. Caleb pleaded until Miles finally whispered that it was his uncle. Caleb recoiled. That was definitely not for public consumption. He was surprised to learn that Miles, who seemed even more hapless than him, was capable of something so audacious. He grinned, about to ask another question, and Miles, without even looking up, simply said the older one. They both dissolved into conspiratorial laughter. On the way back, Caleb was pleasantly drunk, his steps unsteady. Liam scooped him up into his arms, chiding him for drinking so much and him about the hangover to come. Caleb reached up and playfully pinched Liam's lips together to silence his lecture. He asked him if he loved him. Liam froze, his arms tightening around him. He asked what Caleb had said. Caleb repeated the question. "Do you love me?" Liam's lips trembled, and after a long moment, a single word escaped his throat. "Love." That was all the encouragement Caleb needed. He started singing nonsense, loudly and off-key. Liam was completely stunned. Caleb bounced in his arms, demanding kisses and hugs and praise. He made a scene in the middle of the crowded parking garage, completely uninhibited. Liam managed to fish a disposable mask from his pocket, which he used to cover Caleb's eyes before silencing his mouth with his own. He somehow managed to get them both back into the car. Though he was drunk, Caleb was still lucid. He immediately pretended to be passed out. He had to admit a deep-seated fear of romance. Overly sentimental moments made his toes curl with a specific, indescribable awkwardness that left him completely flustered. Back at the apartment, he managed a quick shower before collapsing into bed, his act of being asleep quickly becoming a reality. The next morning, he woke up to find Liam still in his arms. He was wrapped around him like an octopus, a habit Liam used to despise. 3 years ago, Liam had hated sharing a bed, and used to the constant contact. But now he seemed to have grown accustomed to it. In fact, when Caleb shifted to loosen his grip, Liam just burrowed deeper into his embrace. While Liam was still asleep, Caleb decided to tease him. He whispered, "Call me Daddy. Call me Daddy and I'll hold you." Liam's eyes snapped open. He asked him to repeat that. Caleb quickly covered his eyes with his hand, insisting he must have misheard and should go back to sleep. Liam chuckled, pulling his hand away and nestling his head back onto Caleb's chest. He said he needed to recharge. Caleb didn't understand, thinking his phone was dead. He offered to get it for him. Liam enunciated his next words carefully. "I need to recharge." Then it clicked. He remembered seeing the slang online. Some people called embracing their partner recharging. Without another word, Caleb pulled him into a tight hug, telling him to take as long as he needed. It was the weekend, after all. There was nothing wrong with wasting the day away in bed. He only realized Liam's true intention when his hands started moving for his pants. Caleb quickly grabbed the waistband, asking what he was doing and accusing him of being a pervert. Liam just smiled, a sly, triumphant glint in his eye. He reasoned that to recharge, you first have to plug in. He was such a degenerate. Caleb tried to push him off, calling him a bastard. Liam agreed amiably, asking him to just lift his hips so he could pull his pants down. But they wouldn't budge. Liam finally realized that Caleb had, at some point, secretly changed into a pair of high-tech briefs with a locking mechanism. He was exasperated, asking if it was really necessary to take such precautions against him. The briefs had a fingerprint lock, but Caleb couldn't for the life of him remember which finger he'd used to set it. After several failed attempts, he started to panic. Liam asked, with strained patience, if he would be angry if he called the fire department for assistance. Caleb could have cried. What started as a joke had turned into a genuine crisis. Then he remembered the instruction manual. There had to be a way to reset the fingerprint scanner. And so, their passionate weekend morning was spent with Liam lying on top of him, painstakingly deciphering the user manual until he finally managed to unlock the futuristic chastity belt. The moment it clicked open, they both sighed in relief. Liam begged him to never again use such a bizarre invention. Caleb readily agreed. As Liam got up to find some clothes, Caleb asked shyly if he still wanted to recharge. Liam's response was a simple, definitive yes. After their karaoke night, they had somehow, without any formal discussion, become a real couple. As news of their reunion spread through their circle of friends, congratulations poured in. Everyone assumed they had been together for 4 years, praising them as a testament to romantic persistence. Caleb didn't have the heart to tell them that after all this time, they had never actually had a proper conversation about being together. He decided there was no time like the present. That evening, he would ask Liam to be his boyfriend. At dinner, he kept stealing glances at Liam, who finally asked if there was something on his face. Caleb shook his head, then told him there was something in his eyes. When Liam leaned in closer, asking him to get it out, Caleb grinned. He said what was in his eyes was him. Liam clutched his chest in mock pain, asking if Caleb had been studying cheesy pickup lines. Caleb insisted it was an original. He wasn't a big eater at night, needing to maintain his figure. He poked at the rice in his bowl, then finally took a deep breath and posed the question he'd been rehearsing all afternoon. He asked Liam to promise he would only answer with yes or no. Liam put down his chopsticks and looked at him seriously, agreeing to the terms. Caleb took another breath. "Do you want to be my boyfriend?" "Yes," Liam said immediately, then remembered the rules and quickly added, "Yes. Very much yes. Absolutely yes." Caleb pulled out his phone and marked the date on his calendar. He declared that they were now officially boyfriends and that this was their anniversary. He warned Liam that if he ever forgot or got the date wrong, he would personally beat him to death. Liam took his hand, promising he would never forget. Feeling bold, Caleb added another demand. He asked if, when talking to others, they could say that Liam had pursued him. Liam looked taken aback, pointing out that Caleb was the one who initiated everything and chased him for so long. Caleb just sighed, arguing that he had already left him once. Liam was the one who brought him back. Liam conceded the point. Being in a relationship turned Caleb into the kind of person he used to despise. He found himself wanting to report his every move to Liam, his desire to go out diminishing if Liam couldn't come along. He'd buy things for Liam whenever he saw something he might like. He fretted when Liam didn't text back right away, his mind racing with anxious scenarios. He had never thought of himself as the type to be so consumed by love. After another bout of self-reflection, he came to a conclusion. He was just too idle. He had nothing to do all day but think about his relationship. So, he decided to get a job. He would go back and take over the family business. His fathers were getting older, and the company would eventually be his anyway. He might as well learn the ropes now so they could retire peacefully. The day he showed up at the office, his father saw him and immediately walked to the window to check the position of the sun. He declared that he never thought he'd live to see the day Caleb willingly came to learn about management. He must have woken up in an alternate reality. Caleb just scratched his head and said that people have to grow up sometime. His father, looking genuinely moved, assigned him to be his other father's secretary, saying it was the fastest way to learn. His fathers had been dreaming of retirement but were stuck running the company because their only son was a hedonist. The business had been shrinking in recent years, and the two old men were working themselves to the bone, terrified of not being able to support their employees. Once he actually started working, Caleb realized how incredibly difficult it was. The job of a secretary was inhumanly demanding. Within days, it was Liam who couldn't stand it, because now it was Caleb who was too busy to reply to messages. Caleb was a whirlwind of activity, transforming from a tech-illiterate novice into a ruthless professional who could do the work of 10 people. After 2 months of this trial by fire, his father, who was clearly not a man to do things by halves, had him rotate through every department as interim head to learn their functions. He even spent 2 weeks in building security, standing next to Liam in his crisp military uniform while wearing his own ill-fitting security guard outfit. He nearly collapsed with laughter looking at their reflection in a mirror. They looked like the real deal and the cheap knockoff. Security required night shifts, and Liam always stayed with him. The bastard would entertain himself by telling Caleb ghost stories about haunted office buildings and unsolved murders until Caleb was clinging to him in terror, refusing to even walk to the water cooler alone. Finally, after he single-handedly landed a major contract, his fathers relented. They handed the company over to him. He had lost 10 pounds in the process. After work, he rushed to find Liam, eager to announce his promotion to CEO. But when he got home, the lights wouldn't turn on. He wondered how a power outage could happen in this day and age. As he stood in the darkness, a single point of light appeared, then another and another. A path of candles and rose petals materialized on the floor, and from the end of it, Liam emerged, holding a massive bouquet of roses. He walked slowly toward Caleb and asked him to marry him. He was being proposed to. It was surreal, something he never imagined would happen to him. He had always considered himself a staunch bachelor. But watching Liam walk toward him through the flickering candlelight, his gaze unwavering, Caleb had only one thought. If it was him, he would have no regrets. In that moment, he was overcome with a profound happiness and a hopeful vision of their future. That night, he shamelessly spammed everyone he knew with a selfie of his hand, now adorned with a diamond ring. He texted Miles. "Caleb, what are you up to?" Miles, heartbroken, listening to sad songs alone. "Caleb, image of the ring, Caleb. How did you know Liam proposed? Isn't this purple diamond amazing? I've always thought purple had a certain elegance. It really suits me. Miles, piss off." He texted his father. "Caleb, Dad, being CEO on the first day is a little weird. Father, we've seen what you can do. We have faith in you. Caleb, Dad, what do you think of this ring? It's way bigger than the one Father gave you, isn't it? Father, piss off. Everyone who could make it came to the wedding." Liam, who had drunk far too much, cried like a baby. After Caleb carried him home, he listened to him weep for what felt like an entire night. Liam sobbed about how devastated he had been, thinking Caleb was really dead. He asked how he could have played such a cruel joke. He confessed that he had wanted to teach Caleb a harsh lesson when he found him, but the moment he saw him, his resolve melted. Caleb just held him, apologizing over and over, admitting how foolish he had been and begging for forgiveness. He pleaded with him to stop crying. Liam wiped his tears. "Okay," he sniffled. "But you have to kiss me, then I'll stop." Caleb kissed his left cheek. Liam mumbled that the right side needed one too. And the middle. Caleb paused. He asked if Liam was actually drunk or just pretending. His requests were suspiciously specific and advantageous. "Don't worry about that," Liam slurred. "Just kiss me." "Fine." Kiss was a kiss.